Hi, and welcome to the next episode of Event Tech on Tap. Good to be back here. It's been a couple of months. Merijn, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing very well. I've, as many of you have seen, had a bit of a time off, mainly due to Corona, but let's not dive into that too much, but doing a lot better now. So glad to be back, and thank you very much for having me.
No problem. Yeah, the C word. We don't talk about that anymore. Cool. So last time we had a bit of a sort of general overview on the episode, and we sort of hinted that we'd be talking this time a little bit more about product innovation. Like, what are event tech companies, what are businesses in the events industry doing from a product point of view, which is kind of driving innovation, driving change, creating new things in the industry for event managers and organizers to use. So let's jump into that. You know, we've got some news from Event Tech Land, from Event Tech Live, which you attended and some of my team attended too just last week, which is great to get a pulse of the industry. So we'll dive through that. And we've got a bit of hardware here to show off as well, which should be fun. Just some stuff which we've seen that's being used out in the industry. And it'd be good to talk about some of the sort of trending topics and what you're seeing from the Event Mender side of things too. So let's dive in.
Absolutely. I'm very excited. Yeah, as you mentioned, Event Tech Live was just last week. Always a good show to be if you want to know what's the newest and the latest in event technology. For me, it's also like around the corner from the Netherlands to England is not that far. So I really love to be there. It's a great community. It feels like coming home in that regards. And yeah, you briefly mentioned last time we spoke what kind of trends you're seeing and what innovation you think will be happening in the upcoming months or years. And hardware was one of the pieces you brought forward there. And whilst walking the floor, meeting with our partners, seeing what other companies are doing as well, it was quite evident that quite a big part, or a few companies at least, are focusing outside of their software focus that they had previously, 100% software, also trying to find some ways to add hardware aspect to it to really create an ecosystem that can help you get a better experience, whether it's focused on networking. We saw a few companies really focusing on that, or whether it's focusing on a more immersive experience, maybe adding some 3D, VR, AR, however you want to call it, elements to it as well. It was pretty cool to see quite a few of those companies showing that there is really that physical focus for them as well. And then the software really, bringing it all together and making it into one cohesive experience. I think that's the main takeaway that I got, besides the obvious two-letter AI that everyone is focusing on in one way or another.
We will definitely talk about AI. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, we will dive in a little bit deeper into that.
Love it.
So yeah, it was good to see.
I think, as I said to you, we were chatting just now, at a show like Event Tech Live, the last thing people want to do is go and just get another software demo, right? Because let's face it, you can get a software demo online anytime you want. You know, salespeople are desperate to get you into a Zoom call. So I think that's where the hardware comes in as well, even more so, because if I went all the way from the Netherlands to London and I just saw a lot of laptops with demos or even videos, I'd be pretty disappointed. So to have that hardware element, I think, is really important to kind of get people interested, to bring another dimension, which the in-person side of it is really good at. And also, I think that, you know, event managers and organizers really want simplicity, right? We talked last time about how any event tech solution or product needs to be about saving time. You know, the three most important things: time, and time. So the idea of having a software solution where you've got to then find hardware separately for, and maybe get some staffing to support it from a different company, feels really clunky these days. I think the all-in-one idea, the idea of having a sort of turnkey offering, is much more attractive. People can say, brilliant, they've sorted it, they've got the hardware, the software works with it, they're all tested, so I don't need to worry about it. I think that's a really important sort of thing to consider.
Absolutely, the all-in-one or a cohesive experience in that regards that, as you mentioned, saves a lot of time for event professionals. It is definitely a focus. It's not per se for everyone the right way to approach it, but for a majority of event professionals that just want to have it as efficient as possible, as quick as possible, it's the right way to do it. And that's also why you see a majority of the companies focusing on that aspect. Like we are the all-in-one comprehensive experience in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. So having been there on the show floor, what were some of the sort of standout bits of innovation that you were seeing from exhibitors, or even from some of the talks?
One that mainly stood out to me, also because I just love talking to the representative, so to speak. In this case, it was Will Curran, a good friend of mine. I've been in touch with him for a long time, and he decided to explore new ways and ended up at a company called Click. You probably have heard of them. They have been acquired by Bizzaboo, but they're still also a standalone product, and they really focus on true physical aspects. In this case, it's a badge that has a light on it, and hence the flow of a event, whether it's the focus on networking and you have like the same color badge flashing when you find someone who has the same interest, for instance, so you know you have to network with that person, whether it is to enhance the crowd experience where everyone is sitting in the audience, and then to give them an extra layer to it, you can have all the badges flash, which also gives some positive feedback to the speaker. In this case, there's a lot of
Yeah.
use cases, and I think it's something that quite a few companies have tried to accomplish in one way or another. Like there was this company that also had a bracelet. You have to shake each other's hand, and then when you shake each other's hand, you have a connection.
Mm.
Didn't always work. Like for me, I shook like 100 people hands, and then at the end, I thought I had 100 connections, but then only 5 came actually true.
Oh
So you
no.
lose a lot of the data. And with Click, it's a bit more straightforward. You just double tap at the same time on your badge, and you exchange information, so you don't have to take out your phone or your business card. I think that
Yeah.
also lowers the boundary for people to connect with each other, exchange details without the awkward additional steps that we have to take. And for those more introvert, they can walk past a booth, just
Mm.
quickly grab the information.
It's
Not everyone
interesting,
would
isn't it?
like to talk
How
to salespeople. So
it's interesting how
yeah.
technologies like QR and NFC, which were sort of a little bit poo-pooed when they sort of made a resurgence. I mean, they've been going for years and
Yes.
years, but QR for a long time, people were like, oh, that's so 2000s. I'm not interested in that. These days, you can't walk around the show without seeing dozens of QR codes everywhere, on badges, on walls, on stands, to check in, to connect. And same with NFC. Click's a great example where I'm assuming that's the technology behind it, but it's a really handy way of connecting and kind of having a touch point which people can self-serve on, right? Because every phone now is
Yes.
NFC enabled, so you really have a much lower barrier to entry on that tech side. And
Very
a
true.
lot of NFC business cards out there these days, which is great for sustainability, not so great for the printing companies. But a lot of people are just tapping and connecting that way, sharing contact information, following on LinkedIn. So it's really great to see that stuff as well sort of proliferate finally in a really meaningful way.
Absolutely. For instance, I haven't had a business card in forever. Once I was introduced to the NFC business card, I've always had one of those. You can quickly exchange your information, and it's more sustainable. It's a bit more fun, innovative, or however you want to call it. And I think in general, sustainability. Obviously, this time Event Tech Live was kind of side by side with Sustainability Live. I'm not 100% sure what the show was called, but half of the
Yeah.
show
Event
floor was
Sustainability Live.
exactly,
ESL.
yes, was completely dedicated to sustainability. And I think that's also, as you mentioned, like QR codes have been around for a long time. Sustainability has been around for forever, and it's always been in kind of more the background. And maybe there was one booth that really focused on sustainability, but the fact that you see shows like Event Tech Live really embracing sustainability and putting more on the forefront, I think that's also one of the trends that, as software companies that are inherently more sustainable, we still use electricity, don't get me wrong, but um, we are a lot more sustainable compared to physical alternatives. And I
Yeah.
think that's also a part that more and more companies are taking into their messaging and showing to people actually how much of their carbon footprint they can reduce by using more efficient software, by using new innovative techniques um, that can help you reduce that carbon footprint, because we're getting more and more towards like the 2030 and the 2050 goals, where we have to be completely carbon neutral. Well, we have a
Yeah.
lot to do there. So
COP28 is just
that
around
also
the
was a big
corner.
trend.
We'll be there.
Oh yeah,
It's going to be an
absolutely.
interesting show. 2 years till till COP30. So there's it's an interesting halfway point, I think, between the Paris Accord and the deadline.
Yes.
So lots to get decided. As you say, a great way to cut down on paper waste, on unnecessary travel, on so many aspects of the event which could be considered wasteful. And I saw a lot of people were talking about hybrid still. I mean, what's your sense from the industry, from your perspective? Hybrid's getting shouted about a lot. Are lots of people doing hybrid still?
Yeah, I think if you look at the breakdown of events, there's even still companies that are still 100% virtual, which I admire, obviously. But the majority is, I would say 50-50 is either completely in person or a hybrid. So a hybrid 50% of, let's say there's 90% left besides the 10% that's focusing completely on virtual. You have like
Yeah,
45% that is on hybrid and 45% that's completely in person.
yeah,
So the in-person aspect is real big. But if you look at it combined, still more than half incorporates some way of a virtual element to their show. And that uh, we are not supposed to talk, or I'd rather not talk about the C word, but it still affects people. Like I thought it was completely eradicated, like no one's talking about it anymore, so we're fine. But
yeah,
when you talk to event professionals, what you hear both from the supplier side as from um, the actual event professionals themselves, the organizers, yeah, it can be that your keynote speaker all of a sudden catches something that they didn't take into account, and then they were supposed
yeah,
to have this big session, and all of a sudden they can't be there, and that causes some interesting problems where then all of a sudden, because they've had this period where everything was possible and you could just beam up someone in 2 seconds because everything was mainly focused on the virtual aspect, then they're like, oh, the speaker can't be here, but you can call them in through a Zoom, right? And just have them on the screen. But if that wasn't taken
yeah,
into account into the budget, and they may not have a Zoom room on standby because
yeah.
it was supposed to be completely in person, then that causes some very last minute difficulties that because we are so used to the ease of having someone that cannot be there just be there all
Yeah.
of a sudden.
I think the way that people have been brought in, and the way the technology of sort of virtual attendance and virtual speakers has matured, it actually isn't very expensive to do anymore. So we had an interesting case. So we run this conference every year just in the lead up to COP. So last year we actually had a speaker who couldn't attend, and they were fairly well known. So we were able to use ChatGPT to pretend to be them, which was quite fun. But this
Nice.
year, they again can't attend in person, but this time they've agreed to do a Zoom connection in, so they wouldn't be, so they wouldn't have ChatGPT impersonating them on stage. And really, it hasn't added much to the budget at all because we're broadcasting out anyway. We're recording it all, so to bring in a Zoom feed into vMix these days is very, very cheap.
Yeah.
And it brings me on to a point which I wanted to sort of throw out there about hybrid. Julius Solaris, who everyone in the events industry knows well these days on LinkedIn, a great influencer, some really good insight from him, was talking about hybrid and saying how really when you run a hybrid event, you're running two events. You're running the in-person, and then you're sort of doubling your budget by running the virtual side as well. And I sort of wanted to get your take on that doubling the budget side of things as well, right? Because yes, it can be expensive on the AV side specifically, and in terms of the planning, the content creation, the sort of motion graphics, everything you need to make a really professional looking bit of live content. But I wonder, is part of the problem not that sometimes, a lot of the time, the AV gets over-spec'd. You know, you'll get a quote out to various suppliers, and they'll come back and they'll be like, "Oh, you need this, you know, OB truck or this broadcast ready sort of solution, this TV level sort of operation, and we're getting all these mixing desks and this and that and the other." Whereas in reality, you can do it on a very small budget, right? I mean, what's your experience on that side of things?
This conversation has been going on for a long time. And the opinions have been divided on all sides, and I understand both sides. I think it very much depends on how your initial events was planned, because if you look at quite a big part of the in-person events, they always want to record their content, because if they are smart about it, let's put it like that, they have a lot to reuse and actually keep people engaged for, let's say the next event next year. And that way that content can be repurposed over and over again. So you want to record that anyway. So there's going to be a camera, not all events, but majority of the events, you have a camera in the back of the room that is recording it anyway. And if you don't want to put in too much effort, all you have to do is, as you mentioned, like you have the recordings, you put them online for people to see. That can be an hybrid event. Definitely not going to cost you the world. Definitely not going to get you the best engagement either. But in that way, you kind of have a hybrid event, very basically. The moment you start doing it from my perspective, the right way, which is also to take into account that people who are there in person are different than the people that are there from a virtual perspective that are joining online. Then you have to take into account with your planning. It doesn't have to be completely two separate ways to do it, but that you have some special elements for people that are online to feel special and feel part of the event, and for people that are in person there, also create a special thing for them. It can be that you have an exclusive networking session that's only taking place in person, or that's only taking place online, just to reward them for being there and feel seen and feel part of the event, rather than what you see a lot of times, as I mentioned in the first example. They stick a camera in the room. Yeah, you can see the content, which is great, but you don't feel part of the event. You cannot interact. You cannot ask questions. You cannot really be there and feel seen if you are joining online. Or if you completely focus on the online aspect, it could be that people in person feel kind of left out because everyone is only focusing on the camera and making sure that the people behind the screen feel entertained. So you have to find a balance in that, and preferably find something that adds for both audiences a unique aspect. Well, that takes some additional time in terms of planning. Definitely not twice the cost, let's put it like that, but it will take some extra time. And you have to facilitate that in a way where, if you want to do it simultaneously, like that's also, you can do hybrid simultaneously, like taking place at the same time. You can also do it asynchronously, anyway. So
that's a great
not
point.
at the same time. So in-person event takes place, you record some of the session, and then you have a virtual event platform that the day after, or maybe the day before, people can look at the recorded sessions, but also have some unique sessions with speakers that maybe couldn't be there, that do their online session in a live way. You can do everything pre-recorded. There's such a broad spectrum of how you can approach it. I truly believe that it will never be twice the cost. If you look at all the things you've already in place for the in-person event, you don't have to double all of that, period. Like, you don't need twice the venue. you know. And even if you have a very specced out virtual event platform, it won't be the cost of a very big venue.
Yeah.
Depends, obviously. Maybe you have only 50 people in person, you have a very small room, and you have 100,000 people online. Yeah, okay. Costs are going to be distributed another way. But then again, you have 100,000 people that are joining, that are drawing eyeballs to your exhibitors, that drive revenue. If you ask them for like €5 to join the event, you have another 500,000 euros in the bank. Um, in that way, it actually brings more of a return on investment. And even though the costs are higher, there is a broader reach if you have the right audience. If you have people that don't want to join online, don't add a hybrid component to your event. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
But for the majority that also have people interested that are on the other side of the world that would love to join but don't have the time or the budget to take a plane and go to the other side of the world, you want to include them and make them feel part. And if you take a little bit more effort, you can actually charge them for it, because it's not just a recording. You actually take effort, they feel part of it, they want to be there. um, then there's a higher return on investment. And yeah, there's cost
Yeah.
involved, but if you get more back, then I don't see why we should focus so much on what it costs. It should be more focus on what can be my return on that investment.
Yeah,
Um,
and getting
yeah,
mileage out of the content,
yeah,
right? I mean, at
absolutely.
Gather, for example, we've recently put a lot of effort into launching a community app. So not just an event app, but an always-on home where you can connect to any event that brand is running, and crucially also use as a bit of a marketing platform. So there's this real sort of the marketing side of brand teams and the event side of brand teams continues to sort of merge. I think it has done over the last few years, where the functions are becoming very intertwined, and there's a lot of activity on both sides. And in some cases, even those teams are one team. And so it means that, not only is your event a platform for talking about, whatever content's happening there, and doing a sales piece and talking about speakers or product, but it also becomes a platform to talk about brand and build intangible value around, building a sort of followership and a community around your brand. So I think that's a really important sort of way to look at hybrid as well, is the reusability factor of recreating content, creating bite-sized snippets, using an event as a driver for sort of year-round marketing is a really kind of crucial strategy these days, because you've got to do more for less.
Absolutely.
That's important. And
Absolutely.
on a side note, I don't know what I'm really keen for your insight here as well, right? So we've noticed a huge shift in legislation around SMS messaging and email as well, where even a couple of years ago, SMS was pretty wide open, and you could send SMS from anywhere to anywhere very, very easily. Suddenly, out of nowhere, it seems like every single country has huge amounts of rules and regulations about who you can send to, how you can send it. You have to opt in. You've got to get people opt-out options. You've got to sort of pre-create messages and they get them approved by the regulators. Absolute minefield. And so the apps are also a great way to kind of get around the SMS and emailing sort of deliverability issues. And because push notifications are as powerful as ever. You can send a push notification to someone, even if they've got the app closed, and that is direct to your pocket marketing with your logo in the corner. And there's nothing more powerful than getting your message out there. So again, these platforms have become a great way to sort of constantly have this touch point in your audience's pockets, which has a high visibility and a great open rate.
Very true. And as you mentioned, like in general, I believe it was also Will that actually mentioned it in one of the sessions that I attended at Event Tech Live, where we see more and more the line between events and marketing dissipating, or kind of disappearing, because more and more marketing teams that were involved in marketing realize the power of events, and I think that's even something that Julius also said, is there's nothing as powerful as an in-person event, because you actually meet the person. You're absolutely certain they're not using an AI to talk to you. It's
Yeah.
human contact, and if you can capture that, that adds a lot of value, because that is very authentic content. But also in terms of the data that you can actually capture, and that's where in a hybrid case and in the virtual case, like the amount of data we can capture, and it's becoming more and more also for in-person events a possibility. Like, it used to be there, but never worked as well as we wanted it, or it wasn't as accurate as we wanted it to be. But that's getting better and better, and that data is so valuable for marketing, to really understand your audience, to understand who they're interacting with, how you can improve, how you can make your event better, but also how you can make your products better, how you can make your communication better, what's working, what's not. And that data is maybe even more valuable than just the content, although the content itself is super valuable and you can do a lot with
Yeah.
it. And make sure, like as you mentioned, like you're in direct contact with those people, whether it's through push communications or other ways of communication. But
Yeah.
then understanding who's opening those push notifications, who's interacting, who's actually clicking on them, so you can better understand your audience. I think that's where the real value is, in terms of it's going to be more and more data driven, for everything and everyone, whether it's in person, whether it's hybrid, whether it's completely virtual. Data is gonna dictate how we do things, and it's already doing that, but we're still figuring out what we should track, how we should track it, um, what other ways we can actually come to conclusions other than sending them a survey and hoping they answer uh, in a way that they don't feel like, oh, this is the answer I should be given, but the answer they actually want to give.
Exactly.
Which
Yeah.
is not as easy either.
It's the fine line.
Yeah. So then you really have to look at the behavior of people and how they actually interact and what they're actually doing, rather than what they're saying.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's also a big part of the innovation, is where on one hand companies like Gather finding ways to gather the data, but also for event professionals to understand which data points they need to make the right decisions, and also to inform their marketing and their sales team how they can be more efficient, because this is what works, this is what's actually been shown as something that's effective and that's working.
Yeah.
And that's
And if
where
you can disguise that as an interesting, fun experience, then you're winning, right?
yes,
And
absolutely.
thank you for the gather pun, by the way. I appreciate that. We love a
Of
good
course,
gather
no
pun.
problem.
So we did an interesting talk at Event Tech Live around wearables. So it's not necessarily around trying to sell, because I think people aren't interested really in sales pitches at these events, but just looking at what interesting wearable tech there is out there, and how it can be used to elevate the event and create this sort of an elevated experience, and to have these kind of event hack moments, or to create a bit of a sort of wow sort of factor around your presence at a stand. You said before, a lot of the successful places at ETL, a lot of the good attractors still are big LED screens and big sort of content screens. They're the king. Flashing
Yes.
badges are maybe number 2 on the list. But so we had this interesting product we looked at called the Muse headsets. So they're actually originally designed, and their sort of main use is a sort of meditation aid, right? But this is, I've got one here. This is a brainwave sensing headset. So the Muse. And these are really interesting, right? So the first time we used these, we did a bit of a tech demo for a brand at Goodwood. So the way these work is you sort of stick them on your head, and it connects to an app. It's got an API, and you can basically get a reading of how relaxed or how focused you are in real time. So we linked this through to a thing called Anki Overdrive, which is this almost like Scalextrics, right? They're these little electric cars, and you can sort of race them around a track. And usually you have a little sort of go faster, go slower controller. But in this demo, we actually linked each car to a headset. So the faster you think, the faster your car goes, and the more relaxed you are, the slower it goes. So we could sort of race these little cars around a track, sort of 4 people at a time, with these headsets. Super fun. But The interesting part of these is, they can be used in a sense when you tie it to an activation like that to get a reading on how engaged or how interested you are in what's going on around you, right? So you can, while people have these on, then say, oh, why don't you have a look at this product video, or as part of the experience, you can tie in some messaging or some imagery or any kind of piece of the actual selling you want to be doing. And then you kind of got a read on how people are reacting to that at a rudimentary level, but still you do have an interesting read. So we then sort of looked at this and said, how can we take it to the next level? And so we had a bit of a sort of tech demo that Two Heads created, a great experiential agency we partner with. And the idea was you wear these headsets, you go into a 3D sort of shoe showroom. AI generates 4 different pastiches, like images from DALL-E, I think. The shoes are branded with these images. And then as you wear the headset, you walk around and you look at each of the shoes, and it gauges your engagement, like how interested you are, how active you are when you look at these things. Then the shoe with the most sort of highest reading becomes the one you can check out and shop with. So for a brand, AI aside, a great way to sense, how people are reacting to their products, and then turn it into a fun retail experience, which is a bit different, and makes something a bit more special, whether it's in a store or whether it's in their online catalog.
I think it's a very powerful tool. It's like you have this kind of subsection of marketing called neuromarketing, where you focus a lot about like where are people's eyes focused on, how are they feeling, what do different colors do with their experience, etc. And I think this really can add another layer on top of it, where you use their brain waves in this case. And if you find ways to how you're explaining it, like gamify it in a way that it's fun for the user to actually engage with it and also see instant feedback rather than just being monitored, and not have a kind of a very boring experience, just how it always has been, but it really adds a layer. That's where it becomes really effective, not just for the experience of the customer, but also for you, because you have a lot more engagement with them and you get a lot more insight in terms of what they actually really like. So it's a very powerful tool, and I love these examples. I think it are fun tools to play around with. They've been around for a while, but now we really start to incorporate them in a way where it enhances the experience for both
Yeah.
sides. So love
We
those
we
examples.
we kind of capped it off with this idea and this kind of equation, I guess, which I think is really important across events, whether you're looking at technology or not, and that is emotion drives attention and attention drives sales. In these crowded event environments, the only way to capture people's attention, aside from flashing big lights in their eyes, is to give them some kind of emotional reaction, whether it's fun, whether it's surprise, whether it's interest or wonder. That is the moment where you actually can start to connect with someone. Then you can engage them. Then you can sort of inspire them and bring them onto your wavelength. And then that's when you can actually build real, more meaningful connections, which is what events are all about.
Couldn't have said it better.
Love it. So there was another fun bit of technology we showcased at the event, which is out there, available to get now off online. So there's been a lot of buzz around AR. HoloLens has been around for a long time. Great product. There's been some really interesting event tech demos built with it. Bit expensive. Apple with the AR headsets, I forget the name of them, also very expensive. But there is a lower level option, right? So we found this company called Nreal, and basically they have these glasses called the Nreal Airs. Mm-hmm. I think the company might be called Xreal. We'll have to put a link in the description. But these are the glasses. So you actually connect them to your phone. So it's like a tethered experience on Android. And they got these nice little lens caps. And you can have a full sort of AR experience. You can see there's some interesting little lenses where it's projected onto in the back there. and you stick these on, and you can have just crystal clear video in front of you. You can use the phone as a controller, almost like a Wii nunchuck. And so again, and also doesn't look that bad. You can almost get away with walking around the street with these. What do you think? And so there's some great demos out there. Check it out, the Unreal Airs. They're very, very affordable. You can rent these pretty easily as well for events. But it's really, really immersive. I mean, when you've got content playing in these, and you've got these demos, the experiences, looks really good. What's your hot take?
I think we still need a few more steps, like QR codes and NFC chips. It will take a while before it's fully embraced and integrated into a lot of parts of the events or our daily lives in general. And I think that is where we're going. I love the conceptual idea of where it can bring you. I'm in general interested in the technology, so I follow a lot of tech influencers in general, mainly on YouTube, to be honest, and see how they experience it and what their feedback is on using those. It's very promising. There's a lot that we can do with it, and indeed create that real immersive experience. But for a lot of people, it's like if you have glasses yourself, it's gonna be hard because you need to have an additional set of lenses to actually see the image correctly. Before we really should implement this on large scale, it should be something that really can work for everyone, because otherwise people will still feel excluded because they might be wearing glasses and then all of a sudden they can be part of that super immersive experience that other people are bragging about, because they are fortunate enough not to have to wear glasses, to give you an example. So I think we still have a way to go there, but the idea of it and the initial use cases you see with it, like for me, work related mainly, but just having kind of your whole desk in front of you in the room rather than just on one screen. There are so much possibilities, and that's just for work. Like for events, you can make such a experience and really evoke the emotions that you just mentioned to create better connections, but also create a better image for a brand when you're trying to really get people to give them a feeling,
Yeah.
And really create a bond between you, your brand, and your customer. So the potential is there, but we will get closer to what it should be like. But that might take a year or a few years. Let's
So
put it like
watch
that.
this
I think
space.
within 5 years we could be there, if it gets embraced.
Watch this space.
Sorry?
Good for sort of one-off sort of fun moments on stands,
Yes.
but not necessarily going to see everyone walk around Event Tech Live with their AR glasses anytime soon.
No, but there might be a time where those kind of glasses are more or less a replacement for your phone, in a way that it's not intrusive. You can still have direct contact without having a screen in between your faces when you are in person, but have elements to it that, for instance, can enhance the networking experience, showcase what kind of person you're talking to without you having to ask them, without it feeling intrusive or without it making you dizzy, or all those things that we still have to work on. I see a lot of potential for it, absolutely. But it will take some time. As you mentioned, QR code has been around for what? I don't know, 15 years maybe.
As well.
And now we're starting to use it to its fullest potential.
Yeah.
So yeah, it might take a while, but it's definitely keep your eyes out on it and definitely play around with it, because the more you play around with it, the more you realize what's possible. That's why I love to be involved in the space and following and seeing what other people are doing with it, so I can understand how I could utilize it in my day-to-day experience or in projects I'm involved in, where it can really add an extra layer. But you only get to those ideas by experimenting with it, and the more you experiment with it, the more it gives those companies reason to keep developing and get to the point where we can fully embrace it and really have that next level immersive experience.
Love
on
that.
our events.
So we've been avoiding the topic pretty well for the duration, but should we round off the conversation with some deep dive into AI? What are you seeing in AI and product in event tech? What's the latest? What's the latest and greatest?
In general, I think we had quite a bit of a peak in the when ChatGPT came out. Everyone was incorporating somewhat of a chat assistant that could answer your questions or that can create content more efficiently, etc. And I think most companies have integrated that to a degree where it's useful. But I think we also mentioned it last time. Like, I'm still waiting for companies to implement it in a way where I can say, like, hey, set up my virtual environment the way I would like to have it, and then 2 seconds later, my virtual environment for my virtual event or my hybrid event is exactly branded how I want it to be in the right format. It has my program how I want it to be. It helps me come up with program items and find the right speakers, all by just putting in a prompt rather than having to go through all the menus and adjust all the small settings. If I want to do it
Yeah,
myself, obviously companies can do this for you, but even for those companies, like, if your team can set up an environment in 2 seconds for a client, imagine how much more they can do with their
yeah,
time. And I think that's where the biggest potential is. But I have yet to see a company actually implement it in a way that it's really helpful. It's obviously it's not a small
yeah.
feat. It's
Sorry, I saw something just yesterday, actually. A big company, bear in mind, but it's Zapier, which is an integrations company. They connect different apps together. Everyone in
Mhm.
tech land will know it. And when I went to set up an integration yesterday, we were connecting a client's site with their email service. Rather than having to select the apps manually and say, I want to put this one on this one, and here's the settings, I was able to type in a prompt and say, I want to connect this and this to send this and these situations. And it did a bit of the work in terms of automatically picking the apps and running the connections. Still some manual stuff I had to do, but it was a really cool little view into what the future of using tech might look like, where I don't have to learn and read the manual or watch tutorials on YouTube. I can just ask, and it will turn my wishes into reality.
I think that's a great example that you mentioned with Zapier. And there are other companies that kind of also are trying to implement it, like HubSpot, for instance, where you can automatically generate a sales report just by filling in a prompt. And I think it's very good to see those companies doing it. But for the event industry, I haven't really seen it. And I think that's where it's one of the most stressful jobs. We're always busy, and as you mentioned in the beginning, it's all about time, time, time. And imagine how much time you can save if simply by filling in a prompt you can set up more or less your whole event. Obviously, you're still in charge of the strategy and actually making sure that it's in line of your event goals and you're achieving what you need to achieve. But the more we can help event professionals get rid of all the small tasks they have to do in order to set that up, and have them focus really on that experience and
Yeah,
getting the people involved and reaching out. I think that's where the real potential of AI lies for the event industry,
yeah,
to make their lives more efficient and pleasant at the same time.
totally agree. Totally agree. So let's see what the companies out there can put together after I watch this episode. See
Absolutely.
what change can
Absolutely.
we drive, Meryn?
Happy to consult anyone that needs some advice. Happy to jump on a call and give you some ideas.
Fantastic. Well, listen, it's been a really fun conversation as always. I really appreciate the time, and we'll join you again, hopefully soon, for part 3. So thanks so much
Absolutely.
for joining, Meryn. I really appreciate it.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much for the pleasant conversation as well, Nick.